This is Python's Paradise. This is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena, straight out of Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, sporting a beautiful Toronto celebration behind me on this June 10th, 2025. And June is a special month, folks. My dad rest in peace, my dad was born June 4th, 1946. 14 days after I learned somebody else was born, a gentleman named Frank Donald Goodish. Wrestling fans will know him as Bruiser Brody. And Bruiser Brody has another nice little connection with me because I was born July 8th, 1972, the year he married my lovely guest who's going to pay tribute with me on Bruiser today. Folks, I give you the awesome Barbara Goodish. How do you do, Barbara?
Well, thank you very much, Greg, for having me on the show. I'm really looking forward to it.
Didn't you like my little bit of tie-in history there?
Yes, yeah. Little bit of history.
I was like, well, I was looking up some stuff before I had you on here. I was like, he was born 14 days after my dad.
18th of June, 1946.
Yep. That was the same year It's a Wonderful Life came out, and Hitchcock made Notorious. So yeah. Um, awesome stuff. And of course, 1972, you two married. I guess this is my first question.
It was 1980. So that was
1980 you got married?
1980, the 8th of July. Yes.
It says on Wikipedia, it says
You know,
1972.
they've got me Barbara Smith. So don't ever believe everything you see on Wikipedia, because who is Barbara Smith? I'm not Barbara Smith.
That wasn't your previous name, huh?
No. So
Ah.
just so you know that not everything on there is 100% correct.
Well, at
They're
least they
pretty
got
close.
us.
28 years.
So so you're telling me you got married on July 8th, 1980?
Yeah, we had met in 1977. And then we got married it's got the 70s. We met in the 70s and finally got married on July the 8th.
You want me to tell you what I was doing on July the 8th?
Oh,
That was the day I turned 8 years old.
well, see?
I was born July 8th, 1972. Yeah, I guess they got that. Good thing they got his birthright.
Well, but pretty accurate. Yeah, like I said, when I have looked at a lot of history about Frank on the internet,
Hmm.
I have no idea where they've got it from.
Okay. Well, I thank you for correcting me. I stand corrected.
I didn't want to, but I thought
No, 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 no.
maybe.
That's okay. That's okay. I appreciate it. Because there's a lot of people that will hear this and be like, okay, even with the news today,
Oh,
mainstream media, you can't trust half the stuff they say. Yeah, I
no.
mean, yeah, don't get me started on the
Oh,
Canadian election recently. Ugh.
no. Well,
But
let's not even touch on that here. Nothing.
yeah, yeah. Um, I just have these image of Frank going like this with his hair, and I'm like, yeah, that's how we're all feeling right now.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That picture, yeah, I see that picture quite a bit. That picture and the one, Huss,
Yep.
Huss, Huss. Those two are the things I see the most of him, with the one you just said and the other one with the Huss, when he used to do that on the interviews.
Before we get into some history here, I'm quite happy. I started collecting the LJN wrestling figures, the rubber ones, and I've got a whole bunch of them over there in a plastic bin that I get a lot of them at the conventions and whatnot. And they just started up a company called, I think Princess Victoria told me about it, called Big Rubber Guys. And I guess they're coming out with a Bruiser Brody.
Yes, they've contacted me, and yes, they're meant to be coming out with one of Frank. Did you ever see the one that the Power Town You know the Power Town that came out with the Greg Gagne's that he was involved with, the figure that they did come
No,
out with.
really?
And this is it. Can you see it?
Oh, wow, that looks great.
That
I'd
is
never
it.
seen that.
And it's really cool because you open it up
Oh, wow, the
and
belt
it's,
is.
yeah, it's got, if you can see all that, I'm not sure how
Oh,
good it's
yeah. Is there a chain in there? There is a chain in there,
the
isn't there?
chain, of course. Yeah, that was one of his things. There's a chain. There's some a his thing he wore on his chest, his little
Yeah.
coat that he put on, and then the whole thing. It was done really good, and then the back.
Oh, beautiful. And I like they got that split thing in the midsection there. So I like those figures where they could do the
Yeah,
extra bend. Yeah.
right. And then they came out with the Vern Gagne, Luthiers, Magnum TA, Kerry Von Erich, and Stan Hansen. They're also the
Oh,
figures in the
wow.
thing, if you can see down.
Oh, wow. Luthaz as well.
Yes, Luthiers as well. This was they came out with six of them, and these are the six that they came out with. But what it is, if you look at that, they even did look at his, which I kind of, his head, one of the
It's,
few ones,
oh,
but it's really good. I mean, it's quite incredible, really. Even
yeah.
though when, even though when I always look at that, it's too many memories.
Wow. Well, I'm looking forward to the big rubber guys figure, you know. I'm glad they're starting to do those. I always like those, you know. Like it's hard to find them with accessories. I've got four Terry Funks. No
Oh,
branding iron, but I finally got a hat. Two of them
yeah.
look like a dog got hold of them, but I just calculate that as a hardcore match.
And then, yeah, I saw Dory just a couple of weeks ago in St. Louis. I had a chance to spend some time with Dory. So he's
84
still
years
going.
old.
I
Yeah.
cannot, I mean, and he's still going around. I
Yeah.
mean, he's still taking, going to these fan fests and everything. But it's really nice because I never used to go to any of them until Larry Mattisak when I wrote the book, because I sort of, when everything happened, I just kind of stayed away from wrestling. But now I so enjoy going meeting so many different people that tell me stories about Frank, because we're all getting up there in age. So it's very nice to see everybody.
I'm so glad that you're embracing that, you know, and th these conventions, I started doing them in 2017 when a Canadian actress invited me, and that was in Toronto, and I've done about 10 of them, and I have a blast at these, and um, I've never been to a wrestling one, but I've had a few wrestling personalities on the show here, but I gotta say, I have a blast at those. I did my first one in the States a year ago, April. I did Chiller in Parsippany, New Jersey. Yeah.
Did you
So
meet any of the wrestlers there? There was, I think there was a few there, wasn't there? Was
no,
there?
not at that one, but they had a big room full of the Warriors reunion from that
Okay.
movie, and I had a few of them on the show, so it was nice to meet. Um, But I've had a few wrestlers on here. Like I did a tribute to Roddy Piper, had his son and daughter on here. Larry Zbyszko's been on here. Princess Victoria. Don't get her started on Vince McMahon. But nonetheless, she's a hoot. Oh, I've had James Ellsworth on here and Jerry Swirls, who's an independent wrestler. I've had a few, you know. And I love doing the tributes because unfortunately we've lost a few and I do tribute interviews when people pass, like I did with Piper, and I've had Alfred Hitchcock's granddaughter on here. I've had yeah, Audrey Hepburn's eldest son on here. You know, it I love celebrating these names, and I definitely am honored to celebrate Bruiser Brody. And I gotta ask, going back, I want to hear about that first time you two met. I'm going to
Oh,
assume he must have been the pursuer.
what it was, I just happened to be working in a hotel in Sydney,
Hmm.
Australia. and all the boys used to come to the hotel. That's where they stayed when they did a tour. There was a tour that was Australia and New Zealand. So this hotel was where all the boys, call them boys, all the
Mhm.
wrestlers used to
Yep.
stay. So this was the time you have to remember before cell phones, before social media. So this was the time when, if you were away for any length of time, you wrote letters, especially to loved ones and things. So once in a while, I'd come down to the desk and I would get the mail and I'd give the mail to the boys. I'm going to call them the boys. Give the
Yep.
mail to the boys, and they would show me photos of their kids and their wives because it was pretty lonely. It was pretty lonely back in those days, like I said. Now it's not. We can be anywhere in the world and we're connected with
Oh,
everybody,
yes.
so it was a little bit different. And so I just happened to be working the front desk the first time that Frank came in. I mean, there was absolutely nothing because, as I said, they were like big brothers. They're all brothers to me. There was nothing at all. And I had a good friend, Kyle Krupp, who is also past, Killer Kyle Krupp.
Yes,
He's
I
also,
know who he is. Yeah.
yeah, and this one night, I just happened to have been talked, and I usually just did the after, the 9 to 5 shift. So I didn't really do that much in the front desk. Well, this time somebody didn't turn up for the 3 to 11 shift, so they took me and, well, what are you doing? Well, extra money. I'll stay till 11 o'clock. I'll work a double shift, long day, 9 to 11, 9 in the morning, 11 o'clock in the So it just so happened that night, I happened to be working when they all came back from their match. I mean, there was so many of them. I mean, when I say about the boys, I mean, I've met Andre the Giant, Don Morocco, Rick Mattel, you name it, JJ Dillon. And JJ Dillon is still a good friend of mine, and I'm very close with his daughter too. Right back
Nice.
from 40, Tony Guerrera. I could
Yep.
go on and on names. And they just all come back from their matches. I'm getting ready to leave. So Carl just said, "Hey, we're going up to the Bourbon and Beef." It was another a piano bar up the street. Why don't you, just come up and join us? Well, it's 11 o'clock. If you work all that time, you kind of, yeah, I need to chill down for a little bit. So I ended up going up there. Well, Frank just happened to be in that crowd. And as the night, this is late, so as it got on, one by one, everybody started to leave. I didn't think anything of it. We'll be back, we'll be back. Then there was three of us. There was Carl, there was me, and there was Frank. Well, Carl all of a sudden got up and left, didn't come back. Well, I found out later that I had been worked because Frank didn't know how to ask me out or to get me by myself. So he knew that I'd feel safe with all the people that I knew, that I would feel safe going up with them. And then he just told the boys, just make sure you just keep leaving. And that's what happened. So I got worked from the very beginning. He was a good worker, as you probably have seen. Well, he must be a good
Yeah.
worker. I mean, he's still remembered. I mean, this is coming up to 37 years in July, and people still remember him. So he was a good worker.
So, did he use the same kind of lines that Pepe Le Pew would use?
I don't think that. But you know what happened, and this is life. This
Hmm.
is when you're not on a date or you're not trying to impress somebody. What are you? You're your total self.
Yeah.
You're you're a whole different person because if you go out on a date and you're trying to impress the other person, you're not yourself. You're usually trying, you know, to be so cool, whereas not really yourself. Whereas everybody knew me. He knew me because we'd talked a lot of times. He'd been in there a couple of months, so I'd already known him for a couple of months before this happened. So you're yourself. You're not trying. And I think that's what works out when you become friends first before anything else. And so I think that is how it just gradually started.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And you say Australia. I've done a few interviews out of Australia. I've never been there. Little Nell from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, I
Okay.
interviewed on there, and I could hear the nature behind her, and And uh, I'll always remember, the taipan snake and the cassowary, and of course you got the kangaroos and stuff. Any animals there that stand out to you? I know what I see on TV, but I suppose you're in the city area where you didn't see all these animals, huh?
No, but you have to remember in Australia, everything's poisonous.
That's what I'm hearing. You got the box jellyfish and
The box jellyfish, you've got the spiders, you've got the snakes, you've got pretty much, whereas as I said over here, well, they're here, but it's not like, but yeah, over there but yeah, you have to go to really to the zoo. But no, like, in the country you see deer on the
hmm
roads and things like that, and bears, I guess. In Florida, there's bears. Over there, you see kangaroos. You got to be careful of kangaroos crossing the road.
yeah, yeah. No, I like Australian wildlife, but I heard an animal like the taipan snake, for example, I heard is in a very unpopulated area, and places like so bites are very, very rare. So I actually heard you're more likely to get bit by a rabid dog than you are a snake. So I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool to hear. So so
It's
yeah, and of course the Bushwhackers and Outback Jack were from Australia as well.
Oh yeah, Luke's a friend of mine too.
Yeah,
Bushwhacker Luke, or sheep
he's
herder Luke, sheep
yeah,
herder bushwhacker. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
dear old Luke. Mm-hmm.
Did you know Outback Jack?
No, I don't think I did. I
No.
didn't know him.
No, he wasn't in wrestling very long, but he had the Crocodile Dundee kind of gimmick.
Oh,
Yeah,
Crocodile Dundee. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I got an LJN of him. It was the only figure he ever had out. So yeah. But anyway, so you met Frank. So
Oops.
where's the first place he ever took you on a date?
I don't think we ever. Probably. That's a good question. Wow. I think it was mostly just around the hotel.
Oh, well,
You
it's
have to,
convenient.
you have to remember, if you don't know, he was pretty frugal. He's known for being very frugal with his money. That's and you know that he never went out. Usually, all the boys tell me this too. He never really went out after the matches. He went up to his room. I always had to pack green beans and tuna with me with
Okay.
his case every time. He'd go up and he'd eat his protein or he'd work out. So he didn't really go out that much because he like I told you, he was frugal. And
hmm
that's why the biggest thing, like I said, he was over there for about back and forth 8, 9 months. So, I mean, of course, everybody said, oh, he's going to be leaving one day. You'll never see him again. Oh, well, as I said, good chance of that. And then this one night he came home from a from a match and he said, I'm going home tomorrow. Oh, okay. I guess he'd had a little run-in. Like, I know you've probably heard some of the stories about Frank, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not
but
judging him.
No, but you know what it was? It was to do what's right. He knew what was right and what would make money because he used
hmm
it as a business. He did not use it as being somebody in the public eye. He it was a business. A business is you want to make money.
hmm
And if he thought he was going to be treated wrong, which wasn't right for the whole program, he would leave. Because he didn't just want to make money for himself. He wanted to make money for the promoters. He wanted to make money for the boys. And yeah, he pretty much knew what would work. Well, he still remembered. So I guess, like I said before, he knew what worked. And that's why people still remember him today, why I'm talking to you today.
hmm Well,
So,
it's interesting you say that because there's a lot of people. Bruiser Brody would protect his image, and he didn't take falls a lot. And I know there was an argument there where Rowdy Roddy Piper had stated if he took a fall to Hulk Hogan, then he'd just be the next opponent, Hulk, because Hulk Hogan was known for not putting people over. Princess
Oh,
Victoria didn't like him either. but but Roddy was a smaller guy.
mm-hmm.
But Roddy also knew how to put asses in seats, so to speak, just like Bruiser. And so he
Yes.
wasn't willing to go lay down for Hogan because he
No,
knew what was going to happen, you know?
well, that's the same as Frank. I mean, he knew everybody wanted him to have a match with Hogan. That was the dream match, Beauty and the Beast. That was a dream match. Frank knew that one day, at the end of his career, which was taking all the bumps, he knew that that was coming. That was coming. The end where he couldn't be the person he wanted to be in the ring. It's just a common, when you're getting older and you've taken these incredible bumps all your life, plus you've played football and been beat up in football, the body was starting to run down. So he was keeping that one for the last because he knew he'd probably have to take a fall for Hogan because that would probably be what it would be all about. He would probably have some good matches, but he knew. So he was keeping that for probably one of his last hurrahs. Of course, it never happened because of, situation. But no, he'd talked about that several times. He said, yeah, he knew it'd be a great match. He knew that he could have a great match with Hogan. And I bet it would have been too.
Either him with Hogan or him with the Ultimate Warrior, either way.
Yeah,
but I'll tell you, he's faced tougher opponents than Hulk Hogan. I'll say that, and we'll get to
Abby.
those. Yeah, we'll get to them in a minute. I saw a picture of Frank when he was doing sports writing, and he didn't have his beard and whatnot. And I just kind of looked at him. I'm having a hard time picturing him as a sports writer.
Well, it's funny. He worked for the San Antonio Express News for a while,
Uh-huh.
and Dan Cook used to be the editor of the sports page for that, and he wrote an incredible article in the paper about Frank and the big hands. He said those big
Yep.
hands had a hard time because that was before computers. He said,
Hmm.
I was always watching. Here it is, Frank with his big hands trying to type. It was a really good article.
Was his hands as big as Andre the Giant's?
That I couldn't say. I mean, I couldn't. He had big hands, but I've been around Andre,
Hmm.
and I don't think anybody has as big as things as what he has. I mean, his feet. We used to marvel. He used to stay in the hotel, and we'd all talk about how can anybody eat that much for breakfast. And then he'd give us his clothes to dry clean and that. And well, we probably shouldn't do that, but would hold those. Look at the size of these pants. And would always be watching when he got in and out of the cars because Australia has very small cars because of the cost of petrol. We call them petrol. It's gas over here. But because of the cost that people don't never well in those days people didn't have big cars. They're all small cars. Well, they had to kind of put him in the car because he was so big and the cars were so small. So those are things. That's what I remember about Andre. But yeah, he was Andre the Giant.
You
It was
don't want to have a drinking contest with him. I'll tell you that.
yeah. I met his daughter was in St. Louis this past May when I was
Hmm.
down there. So I spoke to his daughter. Yeah, she's a very nice lady, and the kids and grandkids and that. So yeah.
Hmm. I haven't seen the match, but I heard that Bruiser Brody was in the ring with Andre. Um, I haven't seen that match. I gotta see if I can find that match. But do you remember anything Frank ever said about working with Andre?
He was an opponent. No, he didn't say anything negative. He knew that he could do a match with Andre.
Andre
Because
was one of these people, if Andre didn't like somebody, and I've seen examples of that, but if he liked you, he worked well with you. That's what I hear about Andre.
yeah, see, and that's why, as I said, I just spent time with Ric Flair too a few weeks ago, and Rick. always says that was some of his best matches he had was with Frank. He was telling me, he was sitting there, he was telling me that just how grateful they had. They had matches that people couldn't believe that they could have because Frank being the big guy, they didn't know he could actually wrestle. I never got to go to very many wrestling shows, very few in my life. But one of them I did get to do was to go to St. Louis in the big arena there. And the Japanese were there. They had recorded Japanese were there that time. And they couldn't believe that Frank actually went 1 whole hour with Andre, because usually Frank had short matches. And he wrestled. I mean, it wasn't just his usual beat up, blah, blah. He actually wrestled like he did in Japan. He actually had a
Hmm.
wrestling match with Ric Flair. And as I said, every time he did with Rick, it actually was a proper wrestling match. It wasn't just going up there and being crazy like he was with Abby.
Oh my goodness, Ric Flair would bleed too, you know. I gotta ask, what was Flair like? Because Flair's got such a flamboyant personality.
Well,
He's character.
he's Ric Flair, but it was nice. Me and Pam, we met him. Where were we? Oh, Philadelphia. I'd gone up to Philadelphia and a thing, so we met him and we spent some time with him and everything because you have to remember JJ was part of the Four Horsemen that Rick
Yep.
was in with Tully. And we
Hmm.
had dinner with Tully. We met Duff Tully too and had some time with Tully too. Which is it's really nice. And like I said, Rick just talks so great about Frank. It's really nice sitting down talking and hearing somebody telling me, how much he enjoyed working with him.
Hmm.
No, Abby does too. I mean, I see Abby all the time too, and he always talks about his matches with Frank too, because he said Frank knew how to work with Abby. Abby is not a wrestler, and he'll say that straight out. I am not a wrestler, but you had to go out there and work to his gimmick, and with Frank, it was the perfect gimmicks.
And
You
Abby
know,
is also 84 years old,
I know.
you know, like, yeah, yeah. Another guy, I didn't know that Bruiser wrestled, and I saw this on Wikipedia. I got to see this match. He wrestled to me one of the greatest champions ever. To I don't know what the outcome was. We wrestled Bruno Sammartino, and I
Yeah,
had such great respect for Bruno. I love Bruno Sammartino. Any
that was
stories?
that was when he was first wrestling, when he went to a Madison Square Garden and wrestled a Bruno. In the old days, I remember that Vince Senior used to call the house all the time,
Hmm.
and because they were wanting Frank to go back, but Frank was kind of getting his whole thing together back then. But yeah, I remember quite often because it was a telephone. We didn't have an answering machine, so it was just me answering the phone and taking a message. And I do remember with Vince Senior calling several times because they were wanting to get him back up there. But as I said, Frank was kind of creating his craft back then. He was just at the very beginning between Fritz and then
Hmm.
Bill Watts and Paul Bosch. I mean, and then after all that, when he went over to Japan, and they loved him over there, and
Oh yeah,
him and Stan Hansen, and
yeah.
Stan is another one that's always kept in touch with me too.
I love Stan Hansen. Yeah.
So with Stan over there, and the Japanese still contact me because they still do T-shirts over there off Frank.
Hmm.
So he's still remembered, and he put Ribera on the map, the Ribera Steakhouse. Have you ever heard of that? People have that go to Japan, they go to the Ribera. Well, Frank was looking for a steakhouse and found the Ribera Steakhouse, and it's now everybody that goes to Japan has to go to the Ribera and get their jacket.
Oh, nice. Oh,
Mm.
nice. Yeah. I love the stuff that he did in Japan. I gotta say, my brother and I have been watching like I don't keep up much with wrestling today because my brother and I'll watch them on YouTube and whatnot, and we'll just pick what we watch a lot of the Japan matches. But here's the thing. I remember Terry Funk once said something. He said, "You may not believe wrestling is real, but you sure as hell will believe I'm real." And I know what he meant when he said that because Terry Funk was so unpredictable. Well, Bruiser Brody gives me that vibe too, and I love wrestling where you can, when I go to a movie, I know I'm watching a movie, but I want to get engrossed into it, and just get swept away for 2 hours. Well, that's what I'm like with wrestling too. I want to be able to engage and come away like, oh my goodness, look what's going on here. And Terry Funk did this, and so did Bruiser Brody, like especially the matches he did, the hardcore matches, and between him and Abdullah the Butcher, I don't know whose foreheads were carved up the worst.
Well, there's a saying out there, red makes green.
It does. Yep. Yep.
Might not be the best, but that's how, you know what I mean? As I
I'll be
said,
honest with you. I can't stand watching a cage match where somebody doesn't bleed because if somebody gets hit against that cage multiple times, it's like something's got to give. And I've seen cage matches happen where people don't bleed, and I'm like, I'm not buying it. And I know Ric Flair apparently got fined for bleeding at WrestleMania 8 against Savage. And I'm like, first of all, Vince McMahon can take a flying leap in the lake because he's bled plenty of times. A lot of them just from wrestlers beating him up backstage. But I find the blood adds to the drama of it. And it made it more believable when you got that blood. Some wrestlers bled more than others. Frank
mm-hmm.
obviously was one.
Yes, as you can see by his forehead.
Yep. But we watched my brother and I watched a ton of his matches in from Japan, and we love the Japan matches, and for a while we were on a Funk Brothers uh, binge on there, watching especially Terry go in there and just tear up the ring. And then we got on to Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen. And then you got Abdullah the Butcher and all these amazing wrestlers brought in there. And I found myself just loving watching that style of match. I mean, even Hulk Hogan did his best wrestling in Japan, you know? So, and you got Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, did some fantastic work in Japan. I love the Japan wrestling, and I think there's a little more freedom there. At least that's from my perspective. But
Japan, no, you're right.
yeah,
The Japan was a whole different thing than what it is in the States. It
hmm
was near enough real wrestling over there. It wasn't the gimmicks that they have that we've had over here, and still, it was hardcore wrestling over there. And the one thing I know, they love Frank when he went out in the audience and went up and
oh
down the
yeah,
stairs. And I was I I said to him one day, because he used to bring the matches home and watch the tapes, because he would critique himself, because he wanted. I told you he used it as a business, so he did research and he'd look at the matches and he knew, well, I didn't really like that. And I used to tell him, I said to him, Frank, aren't you scared? You've got this chain and you're pushing it around and there's people in the audience. Aren't you really scared that you're going to hit somebody? I mean, he gave me that look on his face and he kind of said, Barbara, I'm 6'5". My arm, you think I have any chance of hitting anybody?
unless
You know,
Andre's behind him.
yeah. And yeah, because The Japanese is more, and yeah, by the time he put his arm up and he's swinging that chain up there on the top of his hand, his arm, yeah, he's right. There was no chance of him hitting anybody. There wasn't anybody up there.
I got
So
to
yeah.
ask about some of his opponents in Japan. Like he worked with Antonio Inoki. Wow.
Oh, Anoki, yeah, and
Hmm.
Baba. Yeah, I
Giant
met. Yeah,
Baba. Yep. Yep.
yeah. Baba and his wife were over here that time. They matched that I was telling you about with Ric Flair in St. Louis. That was taped for the Japanese people. That's why Rick and him went out and had the most incredible. Everybody still talks about that match. It was one of the most incredible matches between the two of them because nobody. It just shocked everybody. How did how did Bruiser Brody have a match like that? This is because he did that. They did Japanese style wrestling, which was the
Hmm.
difference in
Yeah.
America. Mm-hmm.
And I watched him take on Harley Race, who was said to be one of the first to actually slam Andre the Giant. You know,
Harley,
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 yeah. I
another
hear,
opponent.
yeah, I
You know,
hear there's usually four names when they talk about tough guys in wrestling. I hear four names constantly: Harley Race, Haku, Dr.
Haku.
Death Steve Williams, and Bruiser Brody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and you know that his son has started to come to the matches. Justin.
Mhm.
Sorry. Yeah, Justin has been coming to the matches. So there's somebody you might want to get in contact with. He's just
Uh,
started doing podcasts too,
I
Harley.
got to. I love Harley Race. I have a
Mm,
lot of respect for him. I met somebody who had met him, and he said Harley Race was would always give a good firm handshake and was very soft spoken. I've heard some great things about Harley Race. And but it's interesting because Brody. I've seen a match between Brody and Harley Race, and I've heard this a lot. I watched a shoot interview between Ronnie Garvin and Greg the Hammer Valentine, who had a feud late in the 90s. And they loved to wrestle stiff. And they had a long feud. And they had one match where they were chopping each other so bad, Valentine had blood on his chest. Both of them said the same thing in the shoot interview. The more they bled, the more they loved it, the more they loved working with each other. They loved working stiff, and that's why they loved working with each other. And they made you believe it. Um, when Bruiser Brody's in there with a guy that's as tough as Harley Race, what's it like in there for the exchange, because I know Bruiser like to work stiff, but there's guys like Harley who can also work stiff. What's the negotiation in there, and how they communicate that?
I think a lot of time it's just a free for all. Yeah, they kind of because when two people know how to work, that's a
Hmm.
match.
Yeah.
That that's what you call a match. And I do have some of the other wrestlers who kind of work with him like the first time and that, and they say, you see, Frank would always take care of the wrestlers because he didn't want to go in there and beat people up because then that just makes them nothing. He always wanted to give the other ones a few little spots to make it look believable because that's what you do. You don't just want to go in there and be. So who wants to go see a match if someone's just going to go in there and beat the person up? That's not a match. So and
Hmm.
they would say that yeah, that first time it was hard, but he would come out of the mat and say, good match, kid. And they remember that. And as I said, I have these people that talk, and it said, and if you went in there and you listened to him, because if you listen to him, if he called, especially on the green, the people that maybe it's their first or second match, that they really don't know it, it's they're nervous and things like that. If they just let him call the match, they would have a good match. But if they went in there and thought, tried to call the match and do things that they weren't meant to do, they learned.
Yep.
They
Oh
made,
yeah.
and it wasn't him wanting to do anything. bad. But look, I want to give you a good match. But,
Hmm.
you just have to listen to me. It's like the person that knows what they're doing, and doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. If you listen to someone that knows what they're doing and you don't try to put your own thing in, you're going to learn something.
Hmm. Talk about Frank working with the Funk Brothers. I think the Funk
Oh, they
Brothers are
loved
such
it.
an underrated tag team.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
he loved the funk. You have to remember, they all went to school up there in West Texas State. That's where he met
Okay.
most of these people. Stan Hansen, Terry Funk. I mean, there was a whole bunch. Manny Fernandez. I mean, there's so many of those guys started off at West Texas State.
Hmm.
So they all knew each other. And then, of course, when football didn't happen, they ended up in wrestling.
Hmm.
Because let's face it, if you played football, especially college football, and pain. So you're used to the pain. Because I look at an NFL game today and it's like, whoa, they get beat up.
Yeah. And of course, Stan Hansen, love what he and Brody were watch it. I'll tell you some great tag matches I've seen in Japan where Bruiser Brody, Stan Hansen versus Terry and Dory Funk
Oh,
Jr.
yeah.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
I
that's some
think
great
they
stuff.
loved. Yeah, I think they all enjoyed working together. Yeah,
Hmm.
they had good matches, and
Yeah.
they all knew each other. So that was like going in there and they're probably telling stories while they're wrestling.
Hmm.
But
And
yeah,
of
they did.
course, yeah. And of course, Abdullah the Butcher. I could tell uh I could tell that Frank loved working with him. And
Oh,
yeah, Abdullah was a lot like Kamala or George the Animal Steel. I until the internet, it's like I always thought they were like madmen. Then you learn that George Steele was actually a teacher or a professor or whatever, or Kamala, drove a truck in Mississippi. He wasn't from Uganda. And and of course, you look at Abdullah the Butcher. He never ever spoke in his matches and it's in promos or anything. If somebody else would do it, and of course, then you see him, speaking. Now, I loved how it's kind of interesting seeing that because they made me believe, you know.
oh yeah, you see, and that's why we're still talking about them today. And that's
Hmm.
how wrestling has changed a lot. People still love the old style wrestling,
Oh yeah,
you
yeah.
know. So it was, there's a little show, Herb Simmons in St. Louis, outside St. Louis, and he's always had a Bruiser Brody memorial show every year that he's remembered. And he'll always have a match. You know what I mean? He'll always have a wrestling show, and he's been doing this decades. Well, he always gets me involved in sometimes the matches too. I've done all sorts of things. I don't know what, but I've actually been in the dressing room when they've been going through the matches and that, and I get to sit outside and watch the matches. Wow, and I know, but I get so involved. It's like he does old school wrestling, and to me, it's like to work someone like me that knows what's going on. That's how good they are.
You
You
swung a
know,
chain?
just about. I've had that. I've thrown garbage bins. I've done other things yeah. Yeah, I've had a chain. But it's all for the match and they love it. And I get in the ring and the people will be shouting, Brody, Brody, Brody. It's just, he loved down there, St. Louis, Sam Muchnick, and then Herb and Larry, who I wrote the book with, was Larry, who's also passed. And,
Mhm.
but it was old school wrestling. And that was when Larry asked me, there was another person that wrote a book on Frank, and I haven't read it, but his sister read it, and she was kind of a little upset. It touched on things, and it's touched on things that, were not all together. Little
Hmm.
embellishment. That's all I'm going to say. I don't have to say anything else. And so when Larry approached me and he said, Larry was true because Frank trusted these people. And I knew that the book, Larry would be truthful in the wrestling side. And me, when you tell the truth, you don't have to worry. You
Yeah.
write it down on paper. And sometimes people, when they embellish, it comes out differently at certain times because it's embellishment. It's a little bit of embellishment. You tell the truth, it's always the same story because it's the truth.
Yep, absolutely. I wanted to ask, this might be a hard question, but I'm going to put you on the spot. The
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
best of your knowledge, who would you say were Frank's top five favorite opponents to work with?
Stan, Abby, Harley, Rick, Andre.
Oh, wow.
I think I'd say,
Okay.
yeah, I would think that would be it. There's probably a few other ones that he enjoyed working with, but the ones that at my time, you know. Hmm.
Oh,
And
wow.
oh
You come
no,
up with them quick.
I missed out. I did miss out. He enjoyed working with the Von Erich boys too.
Did you see what was it called? The Claw movie there with I'm forgetting the actor's name off the top of my head that put the Von Erich movie that came out.
Oh,
The Iron Claw, yeah.
yeah, I saw that movie. I did see that movie,
You had some
and
Bruiser Brody in there.
a little short guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, and you have to remember, I lived through all those disasters just about because Frank was working in the office. In
Hmm.
fact, I always remember, I was visiting my parents. Well, my mother was already gone, but I was visiting my dad when, you know, David. This is very hard, because Frank was the one that kind of, found David because they were all in Japan together that time. And it was so sad. And he never called me. You know what I mean? You know, never called. Sometimes he'd write a little note or something. Remember once I told you there was no social media back then. And when he called me on the phone, it was like, oh, what has happened? You never call me. And that was just after this had happened. And he was just so upset because those boys were like brothers to him. That
Yeah.
was, and even Kevin says that. If ever I see Kevin, he always says that Frank was like a brother, was mentor, because Frank was so much in the office in Dallas. So, yeah, I saw that movie. I thought they didn't do justice, not even mentioning Chris. I mean, to
That's
have it,
right.
they never mentioned him, and he was the other brother that unfortunately passed away too.
Hmm.
So, and I think the person that played Carrie, no, the person that played Kevin was more like Carrie because Carrie was so beefed up. And the
Okay.
one and the one that they had, I know they're all stars. Both of them are stars. Ephraim, I think Ephraim.
Yes, yes.
The other one's a quite a well-known little actor too. The one that played Carrie. But it's a movie, so it's not going to be 100% accurate because movies are not. They take different parts and they don't do the full, you know. And what I heard was there was just too much sadness. They didn't want to put Chris in there because it just it's just too much sadness. I mean, that whole situation is just so sad with those kids. And like I said, I was there for pretty much quite a few of them, and I know it affected Frank a lot.
Yeah.
Which was it was sad to have all those wonderful young men, and not to say, but yeah, the not having Chris in the movie I thought was strange.
Hmm. I liked the movie opened with black and white. Fritz von Erich because he was the one that trained Frank. Ever hear any stories about from him about being trained by Fritz?
No, I think he was there. He got it was oh, Ivan Putski that introduced him to,
He's still around too.
yeah, and Scott, I think his son. Yeah, and because Frank didn't know what he was going to do when he got cut from football. It was like he was just drifting, sports journalist, and he wasn't sure about what exactly he wanted to do or anything. And in the gym, he met Ivan, and then Ivan was the one that introduced him to Fritz. And then the rest of the story, is history.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's why, as I said, he did so much in that office, and he was kind of a mentor to the kids and everything.
Hmm.
So yeah, with Fritz and everything, yeah.
I hear a
So
lot of stories. Um, Jim Cornette has talked about this, but Jim Cornette spoke favorably of Bruiser Brody because Jim's got a good uh, memory of the business. But it was asked to him about. I'm going to play devil's advocate on this one, going back to the Roddy Piper thing. They saying that Bruiser Brody, they're talking about his issues with promoters
mm-hmm,
and and business going sour. And I'm going to play devil's advocate because if you feel you're going to be screwed, you're
mm-hmm,
going to do an Ernie Ladd where Ernie Ladd would walk around the ring and let people know he was there. Um, and I think I didn't know Frank personally, but I get the feeling he kind of had a sense of what people were like. Am I on the spot on that? Or in terms of playing devil's advocate based on some of the reputation he has?
oh yeah, yeah. And as like I said before, he just wanted to make money for everybody, and
Hmm.
he knew that if he didn't do it the right way, he'd be nothing.
Hmm.
And he knew his gimmick because he didn't. His gimmick was not Bruiser Brody was his work. He never lost sight of Frank Goodish. A lot of people, when they become famous, they try to become the person that that they created. I mean, Bruiser Brody was a figment character. It was a business. It was somebody that was his business. And Frank Goodish, so lo and behold, he was a business, like I said before, he was a businessman. He was not going to let somebody screw him in business. And it wasn't trying, even though he's the one that's, they say, screwed everybody else, he didn't because this was not, okay, you want to do this. This is not good for business. This is going to lose business. If you do it this way, it's not going to work. He could see ahead of time what would work and what would not work.
Hmm.
And and I always say, I always got to go back. He's still remembered today. So whatever it was, he did it the right way. I did it my way, you
Hmm.
know. So, and I know there's a lot of out there. Well, it was like Jimmy Snooker
Yeah.
and Frank when they walked out on the last night in Japan. They left the money behind and everything because they were wanting to screw the two of them in that last big show, and Frank knew this is going to this is going to be bad. And so what did they do? And Jimmy stood up with him and left with him too. And they both left all their pay behind, everything, and walked out. And then I think he went to the other organization. He finally came back. He got his money.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I think they probably realized, well, maybe you were right. And of course, when he came back, the crowds just came. So he did do, even though it was hard. I remember picking him up. I think I was in Los Angeles and I went up, and when he came in, I remember Jeff was just little, and I could see him when he walked out. This is when you could meet them you could actually meet them before all the security came in. And I remember him walking down the hallway. He saw Jeff and he just sits down And Jeff was there. He hugs Jeff and he said, well, Dad has no money. And he said to me, I hope you got enough to get us home. Yes, he walked out with no, but that was how principled he was.
Hmm.
That, because he knew it was the wrong thing to do. If I go in there and do this, so to put all that money online, that shows you the kind of character that he had, especially when
Hmm.
he was frugal. This was a lot of money that he left behind that day. But like I said, everything worked out, and they were better than ever. So you know what I mean? Sometimes it's very hard in life. You take chances. Sometimes they work out, but sometimes it doesn't work out. It's just, but you do what feels right in here.
I wanted to ask if you had any insight of what happened in the steel cage match between Bruiser Brody and Lex Luger, you know, because I even heard Lex Luger was kind of confused about it. You have any idea?
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
I To start off before I go into that, St. Louis. I
Hmm.
was with Fonzie. You know Fonzie? Have you heard the referee Fonzie? Fonzie was the
Oh
one
yeah,
that,
Alfonso. Yeah. Yep.
yeah, Alfonso. He was the one that refereed the match.
Mhm.
Well, I get to St. Louis and he comes up to me and he bought me these T-shirts. He said, "Look," he said, "I bought you something. You can sell them. You know, you can sell the T-shirt. You can do what you want." The T-shirt was 1987. It was Frank and Lex and Fonzie being young. Because Fonzie recommend, what a T-shirt, you know. So that's funny that you mentioned that. People loved, and then he gave me some photographs of the same thing. If I wished I'd known, I would have had some out here. And he signed all the photographs. He said, "I just wanted to give you something
Hmm.
help you along to, because you have to remember this. There were so many black market that we didn't get any money for years and years and decades. And now people are kind of giving me a T-shirt or the rubber guys and this that. So now after all 30 years, what is it? We're making just a little bit of income because we didn't get anything before. Everybody made money on his image. Everybody sold things, made a lot of money. His family got nothing. But now people are being kind and are giving a little something, like the Japanese now will give me a little bit. And every little bit helps, as you know, because, life can get a little tough. But that's that. And we talked about that with Fonzie, because Fonzie was there. So it was like what it was. Lex was new, great looking guy. Frank said, "Oh, I'm gonna have a great match with this kid. If I'm gonna call the match. He's got wanted to put him over a little bit because this kid was great when he first came in that ring. He was green, but he was had the body, had the looks, he had everything to start off. But I think he went into the ring and tried to call the match, like I said, with some of these greenhorns, tried to call the match, which Frank knew was not going to work because he was going to put the kid over enough, not to hurt himself, but to give the kid a good chance, because that's what he want. That's how he was. He wanted to help, but you had to listen. And
Yep.
what happened? He started to call the match. I mean, you know, started to call. Frank knew this was not going to work because he was trying to put himself over. I'm going to put you over. You're going to. And of course, when you do that, Frank just kind of I think shuts down from what I heard. Yeah, Fonzie was kind of telling me a little bit. Funny that you asked that. It was just a few weeks ago and said, until the kid said, oh, he didn't kind of like it, did Frank kind of got a little, you know.
Yeah, Luger looked visibly uncomfortable, like he just got up and climbed out of there. It's
He
like
was
he
getting
didn't.
out. He knew. And you have to remember, and it probably wasn't even that bad
Hmm.
because my son has the same look. Some people have a look on their face that terrifies you. It doesn't mean anything. Their emotions are on their face. Frank was like that. My son is like that. I know a couple of people, their face just changes and it scares people, especially when they're big. And it scares people, even though they're not going to do anything. It's just their thoughts come out on their face. And I think probably that's what happened, that Frank had this face on that kind of, because I know sometimes my son will do that face and it's like, oh my gosh, kind of, you back up, even though they're not going to do. And Frank his eyes were very expression. I think part of that was not even doing everything, but just that look and how he would stamp around. You know, I think it kind of, he kind of knew what had happened. And I know they tell me he just got out of that cage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I saw that one. Um,
But it was so, I couldn't believe it was so funny that Bonzi had bought me the T-shirts with that whole thing. That's how I knew it was 1987 because it's got
mhm.
1987 on there. Hmm.
Yeah. It's interesting because Russ Jesse Ventura tried to get a union for him for wrestlers
Hmm.
just before WrestleMania 2. And he will not associate with Hulk Hogan to this day because Hulk Hogan ratted him out to Vince McMahon. He said if we had had a union, because Jesse had the movies to fall back on, so he was safe. But he said a lot of these wrestlers were getting their bodies beat up and whatnot, and they were getting very little for it. And Jesse tried to form a union. And the wrestlers go out there and they abuse their bodies. And sometimes these promoters, they don't seem to come to terms with that. And this is where I kind of, when I hear Brody being difficult, I'm like, I kind of get it because I've heard Jesse talk about this kind of stuff. The wrestlers need to stand up for themselves.
Right. See,
Mhm.
I've met Jesse too. Yeah, he had some good stories as well. See, this is why I'm involved too with the CAC, the Cauliflower Alley Club,
Yes.
who has the benevolent that when the wrestlers do get into trouble financially, they do have one tiny little rapport that they can go and they will help them because a lot of times it's either medical or they can't afford their rent and several things when they financially get into trouble because there's nothing. You've given your body to this sport and you just kick to the curb. There's nothing. There's no pensions. There's no nothing.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people are in very dire strait, especially now with the injuries and medical and everything like that. So that is why the Cauliflower Alley is such a great organization. We have a lot of Canadians that come down to the CAC too. But it's great that there's at least something that they can get a little bit of help from. And that's about, I think, all there is out there. I know they've been trying to get some union together, but for some reason it just hasn't panned out yet because there's nothing. You give your whole life to a business and there's nothing there for you at the end of the day when you need help.
Hmm.
And I think it's coming up. It's coming up in August. And it's a great organization, and like I said, there's a lot of Canadians that come down, and it's only, I think, $30 a year to join to be a member, and you get 4 magazines a year. It is such a it's a great organization. I go there every year and I help out.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. You see Jim Cornette there with his suspenders?
I said, and he hasn't been there the last few years, but I know Jim.
He does not hold back.
There's a lot of very vocal people, as you know.
Oh my goodness. I listened to him one night and I don't know where he comes up with this, but he was talking about Vince Russo and he said that okay, I would never come up with this on the top of my head, but he said he'd get the biggest raving hard on if he took a baseball bat and caved his skull in so that his brain splattered further than a hand grenade going off into a jello factory. And I'm like, where did that poetic notion come from? Like, Jim, did you take your pills?
I know. He doesn't go to too many of them anymore, I don't think.
I listen to his podcast though. It's pretty amusing, you know. But I don't want to get to dark territory here, but I want to bring this up. You know, a lot of people talk about the death of Bruiser Brody, and I know there's been a couple of videos. One was the top 10 most evil wrestlers in history. And you get to hear about Adrian Street beating the tar out of Jimmy Savile and people like, that deserved it. And then there was one, six more evil wrestlers. And Jose Gonzalez landed on that list. And I gotta say, I don't, I know I'm not a judge and jury, but I gotta say, he plainly did it and got away with it. Not in God's eyes, mind you, but he got away with it there. And if he hasn't done any cons, I know why he hasn't, because he knows there's a number of fans that would beat his ass if he showed up. Um, I think the whole thing was sick. The idea that Tony Atlas and Dutch Mantel were given their summons after the fact.
Yeah.
There was something there that wasn't right. And
Well,
yeah,
yeah. Well, whatever it was, we nobody will ever really know because I spent a day with the district attorney down there, and it's just you know things happen that you have no control over, and you just don't know. And like I said, yeah, it's just one of those cases that it is what it is, and there's nothing we can do about it. It doesn't mean it's not right, and does it does bother me.
I don't blame it. But here's the thing. I hear the story about the situation between the Dynamite Kid and Jacques Rougeau, you know, and Dynamite Kid bullied Jacques Rougeau. Here's the thing. Jacques got him back with a roll of quarters because he had to stand up for himself. What Jacques didn't do is he didn't bring a knife to solve the problem. Dynamite Kid was not killed. I think Jose Gonzalez is a coward if
Well,
that's what he had to do.
he's what is it? I think he's doing children's parties.
Oh, gee. I think he should come to one of these Russell cons and see how many fans agree. You'd see him take a beating pretty fast. How much do you want to bet on that?
Oh no, he will never.
Oh,
I believe
he knows they're waiting for him. You know.
karma. I do believe in karma. I mean, it's as I said, but like I said, like you said, he was already released or he was already found not guilty. And like you said, nobody got their subpoenas till after the fact.
Yeah.
And, that's just, sometimes in life, and I tell people that because a lot of people go through a lot of traumatic things in their life, but you have to not let it destroy your life
Hmm.
because the person wouldn't want that. I have met people that have had traumatic things happen and they've never recovered from it. They have been
Hmm.
stuck in that box. And you have to, and it's not easy, but you have to. It's like the Serenity poem. You can change the things you can, but you've got to accept the things you cannot change and take one little step in front of the other. And it's the only way. And I tell people, because I know after everything happened, I would see people in the grocery store and I saw them disappear because they didn't know what to say to me, because of the traumatic thing that had happened to me. They really didn't know what to say. And I knew they saw me and then they avoided me instead of coming up saying, hey, anything we can do? Don't have to say anything, just a hug. You know what I mean? Just
Hmm.
some tiny little thing. And they don't realize how much you would appreciate just some simple, tiny little gift, that would, but I see that. But I'm not saying it's not easy because you have to go through this, but you have to still live. You're still here. You have
You're a
children.
strong person. You know what? You're a strong person. I'm
Yeah.
going to tell you, I was fired from a job. I work as a cleaner. I work overnights. I work about 12 hours, evenings and overnights. I work as a cleaner. I was in the lines during the pandemic, and all this talk about doctors and nurses, nobody ever talked about the cleaners. And I used to work at the hospital here, and I got fired due to somebody meddling in my personal life. I have no desire to go there and stab somebody, but I don't want to go there because I know it will trigger me. You
Yeah.
just remove yourself from it, you know? And then eventually things will get easier. You're obviously a very, very strong person. It's been asked. I actually heard this morning. I was listening to I think it was a Dutch Mantel interview about this. And did you ever sue the company when this happened?
You can't do that. No,
Yeah.
there's no. It's Puerto Rico.
Okay.
Might be different. It was in the States, but you you can't. You got to keep yourself safe.
Hmm.
You don't want to poke the bear, so to speak. I had a 7-year-old son that I was concerned about, and I had to, protect because Tony. I've talked a lot to Tony, and in fact, I
Hmm.
owe Dutch I do owe Dutch a telephone call. He called me last week. I've got to call him back,
Hmm.
and yeah, I mean, there's a lot. People wanted me to do things. Tony wanted me to do things, but why am I putting myself in that situation and that danger? It
Yeah.
was the best thing I did was what Larry took me into. This is what saved me, was writing this book.
Oh, there you go. Hold
Yeah.
that up there.
Oh, can you
Look at
see?
that. Yeah.
Brody. Yeah. The triumph and tragedy of wrestling's rebel. Well, this is what, because I had kind of blanked out. You know how you sometimes in that you just totally blank out, and it was in another part. Well, writing the book, it was therapy. I didn't have to go to a psychiatrist or a therapist or anything. Just writing the book, writing everything down in this book, it all came out. And now I can talk about it because it's like a third person. It was me, but now it's like that third person that I can talk about it without, it's part of my life, the bad part of my life, but it's part of who I am, how I am today, and my life.
Now, does it have the infinite scene at the hotel in Australia where you two first meet?
Yeah, it has. Yeah. And
I didn't know you wrote a book. Maybe I missed that somewhere.
and
Okay.
and just writing everything down was enough to release everything from my head. Because all I had to do, because when I came back from Puerto Rico, it was the school holiday. See, Jeff came with me. He was with me that whole thing. I'm just wondering if that was the right. But as I said, we were always we were always a partner, and I knew if there was anything of if he had to stay, if Frank had to stay in hospital, he would want Jeff to be there. But of
Hmm.
course, that didn't happen. He wasn't in. But so, Jeff came with me to Puerto Rico, which is pretty tough. Now I think about it. But you do things, the shock. I didn't know until I got to Puerto Rico that he had passed. I just thought he was in a, hospital because it was Dutch. Because when the person started calling me, when this woman started calling me, well, I've had a lot of strange women call me trying to cause trouble. When you're there and you're in your man's in the public eye, sometimes you get a lot of women that are trying to cause trouble.
Yeah.
So I never took beat when people would call me. I would just kind of hang up. Like I said, we didn't have an answering machine back in those days, so it was you answered the phone. So, like I said, when this lady started calling me that night, I didn't take her seriously. Telling me, "Oh yeah, I fly down to Puerto Rico. I'm going to be very popular." So I called the hotel, and the girl at the desk put me through to Dutch Mantel. And that is when he told me, yeah, didn't tell me what had happened. He just said, there's been an accident and maybe you should come down. And like I said, this was by this time. So when the lady called me, I told her, yes, I will come down because she said she was Carlos's wife, who was Canadian, which was great. She was Canadian. So she met me at the airport. So I had somebody English, Canadian to talk to. So I don't know what I would have done without her.
Mhm.
She was a blessing because she knew the language and she helped me from day one to get everything done. And when came back to the States, because I stayed down there longer than I wanted to, because I knew I had to get a death certificate. If I'd come home without a death certificate, I wouldn't have been able to do anything, and I probably wouldn't have got. So I had to wait down there until I got the death certificate. So when I came home, I mean, Jeff is 7 years old, and a couple of our friends, one of Frank's really good friends, asked, is there anything we can do? And I told them, hey, they had two kids. One was a little older than Jeff, and one was a little younger. So I said, it's the school holidays, leave your kids with me. They had to go back to work. So when I got back into town, I had three kids to look after, which kept me
Good
from
therapy, yeah.
it was therapy. Because what do?
Mhm.
You got three kids, you got to go here, you got to cook their meals, you got to do this, you got to do that. But the secret, keep that mind busy because that mind can be so destructive in life.
Yeah. I understand too. Tony Atlas had to carry Brody to the ambulance. That's how big Brody was. And Atlas is not a small guy at all, you know.
No, no, that's it did. And I did spend time with the doctor down there, and then he was pretty upset too that what had happened. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But as I said, so I came back, and for a couple of weeks, I was just busy with three kids, and that helped Jeff too, because otherwise
Yeah.
he would have had this depressed mother, in this way. I mean, we went all over the place to SeaWorld, to movies, but for me, it was healthy because it kept me focused without getting back home to an empty house and suddenly realizing what happened, you
Hmm.
know. But yeah, it's like I said, and every time I talk to people that have gone through similar situations, and it's not easy,
No, I
you know.
wouldn't expect it. What's your relationship been since with Carlos Colon?
Haven't had anything to do with him since all this
Okay.
happened. I did happen to see him, but never talked. He was at there's another good fan fest. It's the Gathering in Charlotte. He was at there 4 or 5 years ago or something. But I guess he didn't want to talk to me because when he saw me, he kind of disappeared. You know, when people don't want to see you, which is probably
Yeah.
just as well. Because as I said, there's only one question, I'd like to know is why. There's got to be a why. But I've
Hmm.
resolved the fact I will never know. This is 37 years now. I mean, even when I say that, 37 years is like unbelievable. I'm like talking to you, and it's like I'm a different person. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
You
You're a
know,
strong person, I gotta say. I gotta commend you. How is how's your son doing now?
He's doing fine. He's finally come to the realization that who his father was. He didn't know that for such a long time. So he's finally realized that his father was something. You have to remember he was only 7 years old. You
Yeah.
know, he hadn't, and his father had not been home that much because of work.
Hmm.
And, you know, but now he's finally beginning to understand and he can talk about it. And he did that Dark Side of the Ring. That Dark Side of the Ring was really good too. It's the first time he's ever done anything to do with the wrestling part. It's like I said, because the two producers, Evan and Jason, were kind of his age. So we'd gone to Austin to do the interview. Or Jeff lives in Austin, and I'd gone down to meet them in Austin. And because he got on so good with them, when they asked him, you know, they were interviewing me, and then they asked him, "How would you like to say a few words?" Well, I was totally blown away. He said yes. But the thing that really got me was when they asked him, "What do you remember about your father?" Well, this is not the exact words, but it was like, everybody else has stories about my dad, but I don't. And that kind of, as a parent, was like, that's true. He's hearing everybody has all these wonderful stories about his dad, and he don't have any, which is pretty sad that he lost out on having his dad.
Does he have a favorite match that his father did?
I don't think he's even watched a
Oh,
match.
really? Okay, okay.
I, I think he just completely wrestling took his dad away from him. Everybody wants. I've been trying to get him to come to one of these fan fests, especially the St. Louis, because this is good people,
Hmm.
but he's not ready. He knows it might just be too much. So some little one, because he would be, I don't think he could take it with because when I go, it's like you got to meet a lot of people and you never have any time to yourself. And I enjoy it now for the time that I'm there because I'm enjoying
Hmm.
meeting the people that I see from all these different ones and the guys and the girls. And, it just takes me back to that time. It's like what's coming up. I'm going to go to Austin, like I said, Father's Day. I'm going down Father's Day, staying there. His dad's birthday, 18th of June.
Hmm.
And as I said, and then all these dates all come together, wedding anniversary, and then
And yeah, a correction. Wikipedia got wrong.
wedding anniversary, you know. So it's kind of like, yeah, this time, this is the time when everything's together. So at least I don't have a month here, a month there, a month there. It's kind of all together. So it all gets over because you can't help but remember dates. You remember different dates
Yeah,
because
your
it's
your wedding anniversary and my birthday.
like,
I was going to say, um, oh, what was it? Oh, I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? Oh, I
oh,
had something
welcome
that
to
was
my
lodged
world.
in. Oh, yeah, I was going to say, regarding your son, I can kind of see that because I know Owen Hart's wife doesn't want anything to do with the wrestling thing either after that. I get that.
Oh,
I'd
I
be the
know.
same way.
Yeah, that was the way that they did her and the way they did Owen.
Yep.
Um, that was, and I think just seeing that image when to actually show it on TV and just not to cut away and still go ahead and do the match. Well, they did that too in Puerto Rico after everybody in Puerto Rico they just thought it was a gimmick. They didn't, you know what I mean? They didn't realize
Hmm.
that it was, and especially with Owen's death, that they just went ahead and wrestled, and here he was. He died in the ring.
Yep.
That was one of the ones of. There's been quite a few in the wrestling,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and
I got a
it's
couple more questions I want to ask. One, going back to Frank in the ring, when he and Abdullah wrestled, or even when him in one of the funks or whatever, and there's a lot of bleeding. Okay, did he carry a blade on him, or did they blade it? How do you have any idea how they decided on that? Because him and Abdullah, it's like it's impossible for them to do a match without bleeding.
And that's why people remember, and that's why people love, Um, I think they had it taped somewhere,
Of
little
course,
teeny
Abdullah
thing.
had the fork, you know.
Oh, God, that fork. Every time I see a doll, he sticks the fork here. I got so many photographs of Dan Abdullah holding my hand. The fork is right there. I've got Abdullah's fork. Like as I said, just saw him. The photograph he takes, he grabs me, puts it somewhere. I mean, it's a joke. I mean,
Yep, yeah, of course, yep.
yeah, it's just because he's another one. It's like Rick and Abdullah. Just just remember Frank because of the matches they both had.
Hmm.
And they every time they see me, they always say, because of Frank's matches and that. So yeah.
I'm actually
But
quite impressed with Rick's daughter, Charlotte, is really
oh yeah,
impressive. Oh wow, yeah. Um, the other thing I wanted to bring up, you talk about the fan fest, and I'm glad you get to meet Princess Victoria. She's a hoot, you know. Um, who do you who have you met at the cons for the first time that you've kind of gotten to know a little better?
Dr. D.
Dr. D, David Schultz.
Oh, I love
Okay.
her. Dr. D. Yeah,
He
yeah.
got done dirty, he did.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He's became a friend. Greg Gagne has become a very good friend too.
Yep.
Yep, Greg. So there, I could go on and on. There's been a lot of really good people that I've met and have become friends with. Yeah.
Yep.
Jerry Briscoe. I mean, I could go on and on. Jerry Briscoe. Love
Hmm.
Brian Blair.
Yep, B. Brian Blair, whom the
Mm,
Iron Sheik loves so much.
I know, as I said, so yeah, I could really go on, but there's some of the
Oh wow.
like
Yeah.
Stan Henson and that I won't say because I've known Stan since day one. He's one that's always kept in touch for the last 37 years.
Stan
Um,
Hansen.
yeah, he's always because he was such a good friend of Frank. He stayed in touch. Buck Robley stayed in touch. He's also gone. So of course, Larry Matizak, Herb Simmons. There's been a few that from day one have always been there if I ever needed anything.
Oh, Stan is awesome. I loved his bouts in Japan against Andre the Giant. I'll tell you, Stan was the real deal. Yeah.
Hmm?
Um, yeah, if you get the chance, you see Teal Piper, she's a
I will.
lovely person.
I'm
Yep.
sure at one of these fan fests we're going to have to meet at
Well,
somewhere, especially if she's in Florida.
she's in Florida. She and her husband are House of Heathens. Her husband Damos, it's his ring name, and they do a lot of the independent shows, and yeah, they are awesome. Like I usually have them on in December, so I just kept in touch with her, and yeah, I started watching wrestling in 1987. They had the stickers and the chip bags, and it was just before WrestleMania 3. And I remember somebody had a sticker of Jake the Snake Roberts. And me being, I love snakes. So I was like, I saw him with that snake and I was like, what is this all about? And then I started watching wrestling because I wanted to see him put that snake on somebody. And that's where I discovered Roddy Piper and Ricky Steamboat and various people. And all these, you'd never believe the faces I saw on these stickers. I was like, Kamala, Outback Jack, George the Animal Steel, the Honky Tonk Man. I was like, are these actual real people?
Yeah.
And it was just strange watching them, and WrestleMania 3 to me is an event I've never seen topped. That was just Yeah, Randy Savage, another one. So many of these guys, they were like human cartoons, you know?
And so many of them have already passed. That's
So
what's,
many of them have.
I know, like when I was in the Philadelphia thing, didn't have a chance. I met it just for a few minutes. I saw Sabu, and then just after
Yeah,
I got back, and I just saw him in Philadelphia, and he was fine. And then all of a sudden, I would pick up the Facebook, and
he's
that's what I
gone.
said. That's why it's so to get to see. That's why one of the reasons I go is just to see everybody because we never know when it's going to be the last time.
Hmm.
So I don't make excuses not to do things. If there's something like going to see my son, I know I need to go see my son because we never know at this stage. We just, I always say, got to appreciate each day because this is all we have control each day. And I always give thanks at the end of the day. And I always say, well, I hope tomorrow is as good as today.
Well, today has been wonderful having you come on here today and do this tribute to your husband, Bruiser Brody, Frank Goodish. And I'm looking forward to that big rubber guy's figure coming out. I imagine you're going to get one.
I better.
Yeah, you better get one.
I better
And
get one.
yeah, I'm going to get one of those. Those things look good. Um, but I'd like you to hold that book up one more time. Yeah, show that book. There we go.
In fact,
Brody.
it was a Canadian publishing company that did it.
Okay.
EWC, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see
Call
that?
me ignorant. I missed this, so I'm glad you're showing it. Um,
Yeah.
do you have a web page or anything like that that
If anybody needs anything or anything or questions, message me on Facebook, but message
Mhm,
me and tell me where you know, where, like from the show or anything like that. I saw you, like
mhm.
that. Because you got to be so careful because there's so many scammers out there right now.
Well, I'm
And
going to tell you, I know somebody that I can connect you with for an interview that has interviewed wrestlers. And if he gets in touch with you, I can tell you right now, he's totally good. And
okay,
that's Scotty McCoy.
okay.
Yep, if you hear from a Scotty McCoy, he's been on my show 9 times, and he's had a lot of wrestling personalities on his show. And he loves wrestling. So I'll mention you to him. But if he reaches out to you, he's not a scam.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just letting you know. Um, I don't know if Tommy Kovac will reach out or not. I don't know how many wrestling related he's done, but he's good. But I love opportunities like this where I can pay tribute. My brother Andrew and he's my younger brother. I got two brothers, but we'll watch wrestling. We love the Japan wrestling, and he was quite thrilled when he found out that I was going to have you on here, and he's I just dropped. His car's right now not working due to battery, so he uses my car during the day when I use it at night when I go to work. So, but he said to me when I dropped the car off at his workplace, he said, "Good luck with that interview," and I was like, "I am so looking forward to it." And I'm very happy that the honor to be able to have you come on here today. And I'm going to say it again. You are a very, very strong person, and your son is very lucky to have that support. And I bet you that's going to transcend to him as well and make him strong.
Thank you. As I said, he's yeah, and I'm looking forward to Father's Day. We'll be talking about his dad.
Does he have wild hair and a beard like his dad?
He's tall and skinny, short hair.
Well,
He never got
Bruiser
into
was
the
tall.
working. Yeah, he never got into the working out and the protein drinks and all the rest that goes with building muscle.
There you go. There you go. Well, do you have any charities or anything you want to plug?
No, just the Cauliflower Alley Club is kind of like because they
Mhm,
do all the no that's all the donations because that's what they give when the wrestlers get into trouble. It's a non-profit organization, and it's like we talked before. It's
mhm,
the only place that these wrestlers, when they're old and they get into financial trouble, have a place to go.
mhm.
So that is a great organization, and the membership is so easy to do and so cheap, and you get magazines, and they have the website, the Cauliflower Alley website, so you
Mhm.
should really check it out. It's a great organization.
Okay, will do. Well, before I let you go, would you mind doing a plug for my show?
Sure.
Yeah,
Just
just state your name and say that you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise.
I like that. Hey, my name is Barbara Goodish, and I am listening to Greg Gilbert on Python. I better do that.
Paradise.
Hey, I just had you on Python Paradise.
Trust me,
I wanted to keep
it took Teal Piper like 5 times.
I want to do it. Hey, I'll do it again.
Go
Hey,
ahead,
I
go
don't
ahead.
mind doing it again.
Yep,
I
go
love
for it.
that. Python Paradise?
Yeah,
That
my
is
name's DJ Python.
woo. Hey, I had the privilege to talk to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise. I think that's a great name. Hey, Greg, Python Paradise? I love it. Probably my accent.
Absolutely.
I hope you can understand it. That's a tongue twister, you know that? Python Paradise.
And Greg Gilbert.
Greg Gilbert, Python Paradise.
Hmm.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
hope this. You can cut this part out.
Oh no, I'm gonna keep the mistakes in. I get so amused with the when I had Ariel and Colt for Roddy Piper's son and daughter on here. His son got it right away. Ariel took her like 5 times, and I'm like, Ariel, I'm keeping this all in because this is too amusing.
So it's not just me.
Oh, it only took you twice. I think Ariel might be the record. I think it took her like 5 times.
I
Uh,
love that though.
but
Now,
you
now
know,
it's on my head.
and
It's got on my head now.
yeah. Now
Oh,
she and I are still in touch, so she.
I love
But
that
yeah,
paradise. Hey, that's my tongue twister now.
there you go. It's your tongue twister.
All
Well,
right.
I hope you have a wonderful Father's Day and have a fun, cherished time with your son. And any of these events you get to go to, have fun. If you see Princess Victoria, uh, tell her I said that the Iron Sheik loves her.
I will. I'll remember that. And, all right. And thank you a lot. I enjoyed this. Greg Gilbert from Python Paradise.
You know what? I appreciated have you on, Barbara, and in tribute to Bruiser Brody, and I think we did him well on here, and it's nice that he's still remembered and remembered fondly.
And it's like I like to thank all the fans and everything that still remember him. I appreciate the stories that they tell me, and I enjoy meeting you all the fans at all the fan fests that I go to. It's a privilege to know that he's still remembered. In fact, it's really an honor for the family. We feel blessed.
I'm glad they do. I'm so glad they do. I want to bid you a wonderful day. God
Thank you.
bless you. And
Thank
yes, absolutely. You take care.
you too. Thank you. Same to you.
Absolutely. I'll send this to you when it's done.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Bye. Ta-ta for now.
Ta ta for now. You do. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.